Hey guys, in this video we're gonna check out how to play the newest character in Chaos Zero Nightmare, Chizuru.
빛의 편륜에 탐하는 영겁의 암함, 구룩하게 오만한 인간이여.
The most important part to understand is that we accumulate stacks of something called Will-O-Wisp. We want to accumulate these stacks of Will-O-Wisp as fast as possible, because once we accumulated 5 stacks of Will-O-Wisp, we create our main source of damage called Shadow of the Moon. We want to accumulate Shadow of the Moon cards as fast as possible and as many of them as fast as possible, because every time you create an additional Shadow of the Moon card, they fuse together. This is called bind. You start off with one bind stack, and every single time you create another Shadow of the Moon card, you increase the bind stacks. Once you have accumulated 3 stacks of bind, the Shadow of the Moon card will upgrade to Shadow of the Moon Plus, and this would be the time where you could already use it, but you can increase this damage further by accumulating more Shadow of the Moon cards to increase the bind stacks to a maximum of 5, and that's how you reach the maximum potential when it comes to damage output for the character Chizuru. Then we have to understand how to accumulate these stacks of Will-O-Wisps in the first place. And this is where the first ability here comes in, called Karmic Flames for 1 AP. It's an attack card. And yeah, you deal some damage, but more importantly, you apply the debuff to one of your enemies. It cannot be applied to multiple enemies at a time. And this debuff is called Cursed Shackles. What this Cursed Shackles debuff leads to is now, every time an ally of Chizuru uses an attack card other than a bind card on the target that Cursed Shackles is applied to, you would gain 1 stack of Will-O-Wisp. The epiphany for this card that you want is simply this one here that increases the damage output. Alright, now 1 stack of Will-O-Wisp per attack card is not enough, so we need another source of Will-O-Wisp creation, and this is where our second ability comes in, called Tsukuyumi. It's a skill, costs 0 AP. And what it does is, it grants you 2 stacks of Will-O-Wisp for each hit of the next attack card used by Chizuru. That is the main source of Will-O-Wisp accumulation that we have, and this is a very important card. You have to get the epiphany here that increases the stacks of 2 Will-O-Wisp to 3 Will-O-Wisps instead. And this is also the card that you aim to copy for the most amount of consistency possible. Now, since we need to hit as much as possible with a card to make as much use of these Will-O-Wisps accumulation through Tsukuyumi as possible, we have the attack card here for 1 AP called Oni Hunt. This allows us to attack 3 times, plus the damage amount of our next bind card, which is Shadow of the Moon, our main source of damage, is also increased. Here you want the epiphany to attack 4 times instead of just 3 times to again accumulate way more stacks of Will-O-Wisp through Tsukuyumi as possible. Additionally, this also adds 10% more damage than usual to the Shadow of the Moon card that we have. Alright. We have one more card in our kit that I want to mention, and it is an upgrade that is guaranteed in our starting hand for 1 AP called Bound at Dusk. And what it does is, not only does it decrease the cost of like random cards in our hand occasionally by 1, but it grants us the ability of Inhibit. And what Inhibit does is, it adds +1 hit to our Shadow of the Moon card, so it deals damage once more. And yeah, this is the best thing that we can possibly ask for, right? Everything that supports our Shadow of the Moon card and our Shadow of the Moon Plus card, for that matter, is super beneficial for us. And since we are always guaranteed to have this in our starting hand, that is absolutely splendid. The card that you're gonna remove from your save data is the only card that you remove is Spirit Flames Ward. And remember, you wanna epiphany Tsukuyumi so that it applies 3 instead of just 2 Will-O-Wisp stacks, and this is the card that you then want to copy for your perfect save data load. Oh yeah, and before I forget, the Bound at Dusk epiphany is simply that it decreases the cost by 1 until 2 random cards are used instead of just 1. This gives you a little bit more freedom when it comes to your rotations, and that is all you're gonna need and ask for. Now we can move on to some teammates. The best teammate possible for Chizuru is gonna be Tressa. That is because, remember, Chizuru wants her allies to bust out attack cards, right? As many attack cards as possible. And since Tressa has the ability to create a lot of shadow daggers that are attack cards that cost 0 AP, that would give us a whole bunch of will-o-wisp stacks basically for free, and we, in the process of accumulating these will-o-wisp stacks through those daggers with Tressa, apply damage and even a whole bunch of agony to our target as well for some extra damage. Now the epiphany that you want on this card here, Unsheathed Dagger, is that you create 3 instead of just 2 daggers, because again you want as many daggers as possible for those will-o-wisp stacks. Then you can keep like Shadow Reload, for example. Here the epiphany gives you 2 advanced shadow daggers instead of just 1. Remember though that they cost 1, so you could remove this even from your save data if you wanted to, but you don't have to, because a little bit of heal is not too shabby to actually keep in your deck. Then for Cursed, here we apply additional agony, right? We just want to increase the turns when using attack cards for even more and more agony. Then next up we have the card Vital Attack. Here we simply want to increase the damage output as much as possible, and the way you do this is with this here. You hit 3 times, and since we create a whole bunch of daggers, as that is the card that we're gonna copy as well, we will have a whole bunch of agony onto our target, and plus 10% damage per the agony applied on the target is the most amount of damage increase as possible, right? And Cursed Gouge, weaken, more agony, it explains itself. The main thing you have to watch out for Tressa is that this Unsheathed Dagger, you epiphany it with this correct epiphany, and then you copy this as much as you possibly can. That will give you more will-o-wisp stacks than any other character would. Now the third spot in the team, that is a tiny little bit versatile. You have 2 options. We have Ray and Nia. Let's talk about Ray first. You already are probably aware that you use a super compressed save data for Ray. You want to basically remove her entire kit, every single card in her arsenal except for Predator's Blade, because we bust out a whole bunch of very cheap attack cards, and we even attack multiple times with Chizuru via these cheap attack cards, and every single hit that we are about to do profits from this 4 morale. That is a damage increase, the highest possible damage increase support that you can get for the character Chizuru. Now of course you can keep Resonating Darkness with the either with this epiphany here that for 1 cost cards increases the damage output by 60%, because most of the stuff that we're gonna do with Chizuru will cost us 1. Even better I would say is this one right here that adds 40% damage to all void cards, because here all the daggers that we bust out also profit, with Tressa by the way, also profit from this 40% damage increase. Alright. Then she has a card where you can add a little bit of heal. You can keep a little bit of heal in your kit, because in Chizuru's teams the healing is a little bit lacking, but we make up for this by insane damage output. So you can keep snack time, and you will watch out that you just increase the healing and the drawing power as much as possible. This epiphany right here on your screen is a very good example to accomplish exactly that job. Alright, now let's move on and take a little bit of a look into Nia as well and explain that one really fast. The exact same scenario as with Ray also applies to Nia. You want to use a super compressed save data. By the way, if you don't know what a super compressed save data is, it is a save data where you have 2 to a maximum of 4 cards in your kit, and that's about it. If you want more detail, then I have a dedicated video explaining everything about super compressed save datas and even the way how you could effectively effectively accomplish those and establish those via the Chaos Manifestation ones. Alright, yeah, the cards that you want to keep here are of course Adagio, like everything that increases your healing and your draw power basically. So Adagio with this very specific epiphany right here. You can keep the card that heals called Soul Rip. You want to see that you heal with Soul Rip as like much as possible, not with this one though, because this costs 2 AP. So yeah, keep it at 1 AP, increase the healing as much as possible, keep the cards that have a whole bunch of draw power here, and yeah, remove everything else in her kit altogether. About her memory fragments, you want to go for the 4 set Conqueror's Aspect that increases your critical damage for 1 cost card, and the 2 set is the Executioner's Tool that increases our critical damage even further. Now there is a very specific thing I want to point out here, and that is that you roll attack as much as possible on every single item you have. You of course, as it always is, want critical chance, but here for Chizuru specifically, you have to put a lot of emphasis onto rolling attack. If possible, for the true Giga Mid-Max, you want to roll both percentage and flat attack on every single item that you have. Let me show you why that is so specifically important for Chizuru. Because if you go to her potential tree and you check out this note right here, it says if Chizuru's attack is greater than 600, plus 5% damage amount to bind cards. That is our most important thing with the Shadow of the Moon card. Then for every 40 attack above 600, add an additional plus 1% to the modifier. You can add a total of, or a maximum of plus 10% to that modifier. That is why you want a tremendously high amount of attack stat on Chizuru specifically. And that is why for your memory fragments, you should roll attack on every single item. As I said, if possible, flat and percentage altogether. That is a little bit of Giga Mid-Max, right? But yeah, for every single item you have attached, get that attack stat at least once. And focus on critical chance, of course, as it is with every single character. One more thing I want to mention, oops here, excuse me real quick, that we cannot play Chizuru together with Mika because due to us getting the ability Inhibit, we cannot profit from AP gain. So Mika would waste the biggest part of her kit, and that's why we're gonna use Ray or even Nia as our supports right there. With all of that being out of the way, we can now jump into battle and see how the rotations look in action. Alright, here we go. Now my Ray is not ready for battle just yet, and I don't have Nia. So in this example, I'm gonna use Veronica instead. Don't get too confused, right? It's not a big deal. With Nia, you use very AP friendly cards to draw you additional cards and heal you a little bit, and all you're gonna do with Ray is use Predator's Blade anyways, before you spam out like a few daggers or before you use the Shadow of the Moon card. So yeah, it doesn't make things much more complicated, no matter what you use. So in the very first turn, you always of course want to use the Karmic Flames card, so that Cursed Shackle is applied to our opponent. Now, every time we use an attack card, you can see that for each hit we do with an attack card, we accumulate ourselves a Will-O-Wisp. We want to accumulate these stacks of Will-O-Wisp as fast as possible, because once we hit 5 stacks, we accumulate ourselves our first Shadow of the Moon card. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Normally, you want to use this Bound at Dusk card at your very first turn, but since I play with Veronica and there are a lot of maneuvering fires and even another unique card, I was not able to get this on my first turn. But usually you want to use it on your first turn. I couldn't, so I use it on turn 2. Then, if you have Tsukuyomi ready, you're always going to use Tsukuyomi before you do anything else, right? It's free. So that we accumulate now more stacks of Will-O-Wisp. Tsukuyomi does it so that the very next attack I use should be like a double or even a triple hit or a quarter hit even with the Oni slash or our moon slashes, because for every slash we accumulate 3 Will-O-Wisp stacks. So make sure that you use Tsukuyomi and then you use an attack card right after that hits multiple times, like moon slash or Oni slash. You can see here we accumulated a bunch of Will-O-Wisp stacks. That now gives us a Shadow of the Moon card. We accumulated 2 actually. So we have 2 stacks of bind here already. Now we don't want to use this Shadow of the Moon card because we want at least 3 stacks of bind so that this upgrades to Shadow of the Moon. How are we going to do that? We're going to use more attack cards to get in more hits to accumulate more stacks of Will-O-Wisps. That is as easy as it gets. Now, Shadow Reload would not hit the enemy. I would not have the AP to use that advanced Shadow Dagger. So, I'm gonna hit him with Karmic Flames instead. Now I have an Epiphany where I don't actually deal damage with this card. So, it doesn't actually apply a stack of Will-O-Wisp, but yeah, right, you get the point. You want to attack as much as possible and then you're gonna go ahead, right? Now you can see some cards in my hand here are reduced the cost by 1 because of Inhibit, so you can just go ahead and use those. Before you attack, you're gonna use Tsukuyomi though, because remember the very next, yeah, okay, this is another Epiphany here, but the very next hit you would do would accumulate more stacks of Will-O-Wisp. And that is always what you want to do first. Now I can add 2 hits to a Shadow of the Moon or Shadow of the Moon plus card. So I, in this very specific case, want to go ahead and do that. Normally you would use in this turn like Rapid Fire, Dagger Throw, every single attack card that you have, and Tsukuyomi would give you more stacks of Will-O-Wisp and the Shadow of the Moon card would actually upgrade. This here is now a little bit of a different scenario because I have a little bit of scuffed Epiphany upgrades on my cards. But yeah, you get the point. It's very, very simple, right? Tsukuyomi, attack as much as possible, accumulate stacks of Will-O-Wisp. Once you have your Shadow of the Moon card upgraded to Shadow of the Moon Plus, you can either use it right away or you keep an eye on how many bind stacks you have and add 5 stacks. That is the latest point at which you're gonna use that. It is your own decision how like greedy you want to get with it, but once you have a Shadow of the Moon Plus card, you are always free to immediately use it. Never use it if it is not a Plus card but only the regular version. And then you can see, right, we accumulate Shadow Daggers, 5 stacks of Will-O-Wisp, boom, we get a Shadow of the Moon card. Now we want to, of course, keep going, right? We don't use the Shadow of the Moon card right now. We want at least 3 stacks of bind, so that is a Shadow of the Moon Plus card. So we're gonna attack our opponent as much as we possibly can. Additionally here, ego skill here. The more Shadow of the Moon cards you create, the more damage this ego skill will actually do. You wanna wait until you have like at least 5 Shadow of the Moon cards accumulated to increase this damage. You can see this here. We have 3 stacks because we accumulated 3 Shadow of the Moon cards. Yeah, as I said, you want to wait to at least like 5, but the best case possible would be to max this out fully, and before you're gonna use that, you use like cheap other ego skills, right? But again, how greedy you're gonna get with this, it depends a little bit on your opponent and how the cards in your hand actually look and what the RNG presents to you. So here we go, right? What are we gonna do? Tsukuyomi. Then we use a card that attacks multiple times. That will give us a shit ton of Will-O-Wisp stacks. That, as you can see, upgrades our Shadow of the Moon card to Shadow of the Moon Plus. Now we can see, we can use this now because it is a plus card, but can we get a 4th stack of bind? That would like if we wanted to accomplish another stack of bind, we would need 3 more stacks, as we can see here, of Will-O-Wisp. We take a look at our hand, and that is very, very likely that we cannot accomplish that. We can give it a shot through a little bit of card draw here. That is what you normally do with Nia. And you can see, right, we got lucky. Our Oni hunt attacks 3 times. You, of course, want the Epiphany where you attack 4 times. Now, see, that gives us the needed Will-O-Wisp stacks to upgrade our Shadow of the Moon card to bind 5. And every time when you see this here, bind 5, that is the point where you're gonna use this card. Because you cannot gain more stacks of bind onto this card. So every Shadow of the Moon card you would accumulate now would go to complete waste. So use this card, right? And you can see that it also recovers 8% of our max HP. It heals us, and our team does not have too much heal in our kit. So this is another big reason why we want to be as fast as possible in accumulating these Will-O-Wisp stacks and grading up our Shadow of the Moon Plus card. You know what I mean? And that is what that is what the whole character Chizuru is about. You want to play fast, and you have to get your rotations right, so that you accumulate actually as many stacks of Will-O-Wisps as much as possible and as fast as possible. This is not a brain dead character where you just bust out every single card in your hand without thinking about it first, right? Alright. Now, let's see, we have 7 Shadow of the Moon cards created. You can see that once I used the Shadow of the Moon Plus card, I created another Shadow of the Moon. This is due to her dupes, due to her ego manifestations. I will talk about this after this fight a little bit more. But yeah, as I said, like, once you hit like 5 stacks, you can use this ego skill for free. I have 7, so let's go ahead and enjoy this wonderful animation right here and see how this shit hits like an absolute truck. And that's really already all there is to say about how to play Chizuru. You know that how you start your turn with the cursed shackles. You know that you want to attack as much as possible. You always want to use the skill Tsukuyomi first, and then after you use Tsukuyomi, you want to use an attack card that hits multiple times. You never want to use Shadow of the Moon. You always want to stack it at least up to Shadow of the Moon Plus before you use it. Here's another card, Curse. That is always what you're gonna use first. You're always gonna start with Tsukuyomi. With this Curse card, you're gonna create daggers, and you're gonna go completely nuts. Spam everything out, and everything you spam out accumulates Will-O-Wisp stacks. That grades up your Shadow of the Moon card, right? And that's really the whole character. Now, of course, you have an additional card if you play Ray with Predator's Plate that you always want to use first before you spam out a lot of stuff. But you can see here, Tsukuyomi, Moon Slash or Oni Slash. That will grade up your Shadow of the Moon card to Shadow of the Moon Plus, and then you're gonna use it, right? How greedy you get with these bind stacks, that is totally up to you. And that's all there is to say about Chizuru. We gonna stop this fight here and gonna quit. We're not gonna end this fight. This would be a little bit of time waste. So let's go and talk a little bit about her dupes. So here are her dupes. I already told you about these dupes a lot when I first covered this character, when I made a how good is Chizuru actually kind of video, right? I'm always putting a lot of emphasis on these dupes, and here's why. Plus 20% damage to Shadow of the Moon Plus. That is our main source of damage, and to increase this by a further 20% with just one dupe is already phenomenal. But remember, in the teams that you play Chizuru in, they lack a little bit of healing prowess. And to increase the recover from 5% to 8% by this dupe, as well as increasing the damage output by 20%, is absolutely phenomenal. It gets way better though, because the second dupe that you absolutely need is, it says, when Shadow of the Moon Plus is used, you create a Shadow of the Moon card. That means whenever you use the Shadow of the Moon Plus card, you generate immediately 5 stacks of Will-O-Wisp. That at least saves you a turn, and in most cases even more than a whole turn. That is value that you should never pass up. It's an absolute must-have if you want to play this character. So one more time, if you pull for Chizuru, make sure you pull her at least twice, right? Because you can now go to the seasonal thingy here, to this event. You can go to the supply store, and here on the top of your screen is second supply. In the second supply, you will find the Omega code, and this is a free dupe for a character of your choice. So that way you can use the Omega code to obtain yourself one dupe of Chizuru. That would save you resources, and you would only need to pull for her twice instead of thrice. So keep that Omega code in mind, and if you pull for Chizuru, definitely use that onto her. That is why they gave it to us in the first place. But that's about the video, guys. I hope this was fun and informative. If you like Chaos Zero Nightmare content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, don't forget to join the Discord server, link in the description down below. Take care of yourselves, have a great day, peace and love.